Aaron?
All right. See you later.
Awesome. Thank you.
Meeting is being live streamed. Got it. Okay, we're live. So welcome to everyone. We have a quorum, including our proxy person, Tom Hunt, who's Mr. Webb is carrying his proxy for him. So welcome to you all. Katie,
What did I just do?
the statement, Katie, is that you? The recognition statement?
I just lost my sound again.
We can hear you.
We can hear you. Oh, Beth is back, connecting up.
Yeah, you guys can hear me, but I can't hear you.
Yeah, right.
I started the slide. As soon as I started the slideshow, I lost the sound. Are you in my ears?
Nope.
Hello?
Nope, you're back. Anyway, that's fine. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear
Good.
you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now. I'm just going to not, I don't even know why this is happening. Beth has small children. Thank you, Beth. For being here.
Yes, sorry. It just unmuted me and my son wants me to see his large truck right now. So I'll mute myself now.
We'll
See you later.
get there.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Okay,
Those flip phones, just let you know.
I had started the meeting, Katie, and I was asking you about the land acknowledgement.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you, Tom, for that. So as we like to start our meetings, just acknowledging that the Essex region is on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy, made up of the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi people. Just acknowledging that there's been people living on this land for a long time and the relationship that people have with the land and the water. And we like to start with a statement of gratitude and hope. So I'm grateful you're here. I'm grateful that you put up with all the technical stuff, and I hope that we're productive today.
Okay, thanks, Katie. So I did call the meeting to order. And now I've lost my opening comments. This is ridiculous. Let me just check one more thing here. No. So let's see if I can remember what I was going to say. First of all, I did get a letter from the minister's office reappointing me as chair of this committee for the next 3 years. So you're stuck with me for a little while yet. I appreciate the comments that he made in that letter about my participation. I've been here as long as Larry. So I do, if Beth could thank them for the nice things that they said in that reappointment letter. And we'll see if I can continue to do some kind of a job on this. Secondly, Beth Forrest is with us. Again, temporarily, the person who was appointed here before, attended and had one meeting with us, has now gone on to some other job, and I think I'll let Beth talk about that when her time comes, if she wishes. And I did find it. We did talk a little bit there informally before about changes that might happen because of the elections. And Larry Verbeek is indicated that he would like to continue as a liaison from SPA. And these minutes will reflect that to them so that encourage them to do that, to reappoint him. He was willing to stand. And he's a wealth of knowledge. He knows everything. And he has it all down on paper, which is scary in a way. Beth will talk about the ministry changes. We talked about Nelson being, going on to another position in another major municipality someplace. And Katie informed me that Kathleen Schneckenberger, who is our risk management official, was previously in the role of regulations technician with the Conservation Authority, and she's now been, I guess, promoted. It is a promotion, I think, to the position of resource planner. So we haven't lost her. She's going to continue as RMO until Laura gets back from her mat leave. So just so that you all know that. And having said all that, is there any declarations of conflict of interest from the members here today? Seeing none. The agenda was pre-circulated. So a motion to approve the agenda. Tim and Matthew. Okay, all in favor? Opposed, carried. Stay with me, guys. We have the minutes from June 8th were pre-circulated. And Katie and I went over them a couple times and we think they're good. Does anybody agree? Make a motion to adopt them. Matthew and Ron. Okay. No addition, deletion, correction from anybody? All in favor? Opposed, carried. So that's good. I did find today's agenda, by the way. We have nothing from the SPA. There's no correspondence. And so we're here with Beth Forrest. Welcome again, Beth. You're up.
Thanks so much, Chair Firth. It's lovely to see some of the familiar faces here. I've missed working with Katie and with you as well. So happy to be back, even if it's just temporarily. And congratulations on your reappointment. So just leading in with that, there were 12 reappointments that happened across the province all at the same time, which was wonderful. And all those people were seeking reappointment. So those 12 chair positions have been filled. The remaining 7 were going through the new appointment process and were posted on the Public Appointment Secretariat. So that posting has closed. So now we're just kind of going through the process of getting that information up to the minister so that he can make his decision on those remaining 7 chair positions. On Catherine Eby leaving, it is very sad. She was a great addition to our team, and she had a strong compliance background, which is kind of nice to have and see a piece of that world. But I think she ultimately decided that was a better fit for her. And she has, a few things going on. She was on leave for a little bit. So I think going back to her home position just made sense, something that she's comfortable with. As we know, this program can be pretty challenging at times and lots of gray areas and complications. So I think she needed a little bit more stability in her life right now. So it's a good switch for her. It's just very unfortunate, I know, for this committee and for my branch for sure. So we're just in the process of trying to figure out next steps and possible recruitment of another liaison officer. Right now, it's myself and Mary Wooding filling in or the liaisons for the province. So we're figuring out next steps on that. There's been a lot of changes within our branch recently, just people moving on to different things, different positions. So I had actually been talking to Conservation Ontario about circulating a new staffing list for our branch just because of the sheer volume of changes happening. So Katie, at least stay tuned for that so you can have everyone's contact information. Awesome. Yeah, so there was also a big change in the summertime where we heard that the Conservation Authority's file, which was transferred from Ministry of Natural Resources to the Ministry of the Environment, is now being transferred back to the Ministry of Natural Resources. So Yeah, we just love being confusing. So that file is leaving my branch, and the staff is leaving as well for that we're working on that file. All of the other staff, though, on the source protection side of things has changed. It's not an indication of anything happening with the source protection program. It's just they made that decision to shift it back. So we're still going strong on the source protection front.
And source protection, Beth, for those who might have missed this, has always been with the Ministry of Environment. There was never any switch between departments. So it's staying exactly where it's always been.
Yes, yeah. And we were a standalone branch for many years. So it's yet to be seen if we'll remain a standalone branch or take on another portfolio. So as soon as we hear any word on that, we will let you know. The other thing, and Catherine may have mentioned this, but just in case, there is the best practices for source protection, and that document was released earlier this year. And that was really for other systems that aren't currently covered under the Clean Water Act to do some level of source protection planning. There wasn't any funding necessarily provided, but it just created a guide to do kind of a little bit more of a simplified approach to source protection planning. So that's out there right now. And the other thing that we have done is started a pilot project, which does include some funding for First Nations specifically. So First Nations drinking water systems to pilot these best practices for source protection. So we have started that pilot. We did some outreach to source protection authorities and just kind of looked back on different First Nations that had indicated an interest in source protection planning over the years. And we were looking to potentially fund 5 to 7 First Nation communities in doing source protection planning using the best practices document. So I think we landed on 7 First Nation communities, most of which are in the north. Just we wanted our focus to be in the north where there hasn't been a lot of opportunity for source protection planning due to a lack of conservation areas up there. So most are in the north, but there's a couple in the south as well. So I just wanted to provide that update that that's ticking along, and there's been a lot of outreach to those 7 communities and working on developing transfer payment agreements to do that work from start to finish. So the technical work and threats enumeration, and then developing either some form of policies or bylaws or best management practices, all that kind of good stuff. So we'll keep you updated on that good work that's happening within our branch. The next is just to let you know that we're still working away on a number of different Section 34 amendments, which are those amendments initiated by the source protection authorities as changes on the landscape happens with new systems or changing systems, and a number of Section 36 updates, which are those comprehensive review of source protection plans. So we've been busy going through those approval processes. The other thing I just wanted to quickly mention, this is more for Katie's benefit, is that there is interim progress reporting on from a funding perspective on the transfer payment agreements that the ministry has with source protection authorities. And just a reminder that it's lovely because this was the first time that there was a 2-year commitment and 2-year funding. So we're not going to have to go through that rather challenging funding process this fall and winter, but there is a requirement for interim progress reporting, and that is coming up at the end of November. So for you, Katie, for your benefit, that template, those forms will be available in TPON, the system that we use, very shortly for you to download. On the last, I won't take up any more time, I promise, but the last thing is annual reporting, and just that we're kind of coming up to that time again where implementing bodies have a responsibility to report on implementation of source protection plan policies. So we are working on making some revisions to the questions that are asked, and that information funnels in from the source protection authorities and other implementing bodies to the province. So we will hopefully getting that soon. But additionally, we've been working internally on a presentation, which you may have seen in the past, that just kind of gives you, kind of rolls up all of the results of the previous reporting year from a provincial perspective. So it tells you how all the different areas within the province are doing on implementation. That presentation I think getting ready to be finalized to share externally. So if a future meeting of yours comes up and you would like to hear how the rest of the province is doing, just let me know or let Katie know, and either myself or whoever is your future liaison can deliver that to this committee. Happy to take any questions if you have some.
Any questions from the committee? I don't see any. One thing, Beth, is Katie's been very busy over the last year, I guess, with the new threats table and modifying our plan to match that, to incorporate that. Are all the other 19 doing that sort of exercise?
Yes.
You
Yeah.
you talked about being busy with section 36 updates. So
Yeah.
is that where they're coming from?
To a certain degree, yes. The most recent Section 36 update that was completed and received minister approval was for Halton Hamilton, and they unfortunately, not maybe unfortunately, but they completed their public consultation process last fall, so just before the technical rules were released in December. So they did their Section 36 update to the previous version of the rules, the 2017 version of the rules. And that's true for a handful of source protection authorities and committees in the province. So they're just going to have to do a Section 34 or a SPA, a Source Protection Authority initiated process to align their source protection plan with the 2021 technical rules. But for all of the remaining ones that are still working on their Section 36 updates, they are absolutely very, very busy, all of the project managers, and asking lots of good questions about what those 2021 technical rule changes mean and how it impacts them, and just really trying to figure out how to update their assessment reports and plans. So yes, very busy in that aspect as well.
Yeah, so we're all at sort of different stages, and I sort of purposefully pushed our Section 36 back, knowing that this was coming, so that I could incorporate all of these policy changes in one fell swoop when we do our Section 36 update. So in some regards, I'm a little bit ahead of the curve on some of these. So because I only have, I think, 4 threat categories left to go through. So I've managed to get my way through many of them already. And the project managers are a very collaborative bunch of people. So the project managers get together, you know, as we're working on different threats and share stuff with each other. We have a SharePoint site where we can share each other's notes and that sort of thing to kind of help each other get through it.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Beth. Very good report. So where are we here?
Ready for reports.
We're at, yep, report 8 for 22. Katie.
Okay, awesome. So I'm not going to try to start my slideshow because that seems to make my sound go away.
I still hear you.
No, I can hear you now at least too, but I froze. Can you hear me still? And I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you see my screen?
We can say, it says you've started screen sharing.
Yeah. Okay, it's just thinking about it. Oh, I have a little spinny blue circle, so it's coming eventually. Let me know when it shows up.
Beth, maybe we need some computer budget here.
Can I have some too?
Da, 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 da.
Aha. Are we here?
Yeah.
Can you see it?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Does it also, can you see how my internet connection is unstable? Okay, cool. Well, we're here. We're doing it. So I'm not going to start a slideshow because every time that I tried to start my slideshow, it muted all of you. So we're just going to look at it this way. So I wanted to start, before I get into the reports, a little bit of a note on the process, because where we are as the Source Protection Committee is I'm reviewing all of the policies in our source protection plan. because I have to make them AODA compliant and I have to bring them into alignment with the 2021 Director Technical Rules. So what you're getting in each of these reports is an assessment of the Director Technical Rules, the changes to the policies, and then you're also receiving the draft policies. What happens in this meeting is that this is your opportunity. You're the first ones to see these draft policies. This is our time to discuss it as a local source protection committee. Are you happy with the approach that I'm suggesting? Do you have any comments, any questions for the ministry, any questions for me to take back? Once we're done with our draft policies, that package gets sent to the Ministry of Environment for early engagement. And they're going to review it and make sure I didn't make any mistakes. And if they have any comments on my policies, the way that they're written, then we'll make an update at that point. And then it will go out for consultation, municipalities, stakeholders, everybody else. So there's several steps where people are going to see these policies. So I just want to make sure that you guys know that this is not the end all and be all. This is just step one. Any questions on the process?
I don't have a full screen view, but I don't see.
Yeah, neither do
anybody.
I. There you are. Now I can see more of you. There we go. Okay, so the first report is storage of hauled sewage. So in June, we talked about hauled sewage as well, but I had a policy for you at that point for application, but I didn't have the policy for storage. So now this report is bringing you the policy for storage of hauled sewage, which is a new threat in the 2021 Director Technical Rules. So we have to write a new policy for the source protection plan. And it captures a risk that just simply wasn't captured before. So then this is just outlining for you what those significant risk circumstances are. So you can see what those are. This is only a threat in our Windsor IPZ1, Windsor IPZ2, Lakeshore IPZ1, and Amherstburg IPZ1. So, and the storage of hauled sewage requires an environmental compliance approval. So this is one that we would use a prescribed instrument for. So we would write a policy that the province implements, telling them that the environmental compliance approval needs to protect our sources of drinking water from this particular activity. When we first talked about hauled sewage back in the summer, I had emailed Lakeshore, Windsor, Amherstburg to sort of get their opinion before we came forward. So we know that this threat does not exist in Amherstburg IPZ1 and Lakeshore IPZ1. I've done an aerial photo review of Windsor IPZ1. I'm satisfied there's no storage there. What we don't know, because it's a much bigger area, is whether there's any existing storage in Windsor IPZ2. So the approach that I suggested for the policy is to prohibit existing and future in Lakeshore and Amherstburg IPZ1, where the activity doesn't exist already, which has been typically the approach of this committee. And then I've recommended that we manage any existing threats in Windsor IPZ2, simply because we're not certain if there are any, and that we prohibit future storage of hauled sewage in Windsor IPZ2. What will happen if this policy goes through the way that it is that when the ministry goes to implement it, they will have to review all of the existing environmental compliance approvals. At that point, we'll find out if there are any existing threats, because the ministry will report back to us that they've found these existing threats. So I have a policy impact I think is going to be minimal. I don't really know that there is any storage of hauled sewage in Windsor IPZ2, and even if there is, they already have an environmental compliance approval for it. We know there's no existing threats in the IPZ1s, and the any existing threats that might occur in Windsor IPZ2 would be managed, not prohibited. So that's what's before you in report 8, and open for discussion if you have any questions about the suggested policy approach or suggestions for a difference in that. Kevin.
Hi, Katie. Can you just go back to the previous slide?
Mm-hmm.
I just had a question around the scoring system, vulnerability score of 8 or higher. Do you know what that scale looks like?
Yes. Yeah, so the vulnerability scores are determined. They were determined a long time ago. So it takes into account the distance from shore, the depth of the intake, any pre-identified issues that are there, and then it also takes into account the surrounding landscape and land use. So those vulnerability scores have been set for a decade. And so Windsor IPZ2 has a score of 8.1 and Windsor IPZ1 has a score of 9. And then what I do is I use a lookup table that says, if you have a score of 9, these are the things that are a significant drinking water threat. If you have a score of 8.1, these are the things that are a significant drinking water threat.
Thank you.
And it's a 10-point scale, with 10 being the most vulnerable.
Anybody else?
Are we comfortable with the managing existing and prohibiting future? Okay.
I have a kind of a stupid question that
Sure.
occurred to me as I was reading this and going and working along with you with it as you're presenting. Why would someone want to store whole sewage?
Well, Kevin, I think we had a bit of discussion about that the last time. I think it's maybe just as you're getting ready to transport it to a water treatment plant or something of that nature.
Yeah, I would have thought that the treatment plants would be the places where they're most likely to be stored, waiting for treatment. But I'm trying to picture some industrial plaza where they got big tanks full of
Poop.
Other than the trucks that they bring it in on.
Yeah.
So it would surprise me if anybody was actually storing it.
Yeah, which is that's sort of what I thought too. So I feel like the policy has minimal impact on that. But
Right.
Kevin, did you have any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, from an agricultural perspective, or pig cow farmer, they used to store their cow manure in a tank or pig manure in a tank until the spring before they could spray. So that may be one of those occurrences, but in the city, I don't see anybody doing something like that.
Yeah.
The only storage I would think would occur in terms of maybe over a weekend in a tank on somebody's property before they could come and haul it to the plant. So I don't really see anything significant.
Right. Okay.
Making sure this doesn't happen. I think that's a good thing.
Okay.
I think the storage on site on a farm for
Is
a pig
different.
farmer this wouldn't apply to it anyway, because it's
No.
being stored where it's generated.
Yeah, and hauled sewage is specifically human waste, I believe.
So I guess I would have the question too. So I know out of lagoons, like I'm thinking Harrow Lagoon in this situation, like this fall, they pump stuff out of Harrow Lagoon. Is that still classified as hauled sewage? And then they transfer that down the road, dump it into another tank that's on the headland of a farm, and then they pump it out with a drag line and put it across the field. So like it almost looks like a big semi trailer, but they put it on the ground. It's not on wheels because it gets so heavy. They transfer it they pull it out of the lagoons, pump it into that tank, and then use a drag line and then pump it out and drag it across a field. I don't know whether that's a type of situation too, where they would call, and it's not going to apply in the city or anything like that, but
Yeah.
there is areas in the county they do use that
Yeah,
type
you
of
would do
method.
that. So you'd have to look at, so the report starts on page 10 of your agenda. And what I did, because when I'm doing this work, I have to cross-reference different pieces of legislation because that's where the definitions are. So that I've included that in the reports for you because I need them to be there as well. So on page 10 of this report, it tells you all the definitions of hauled sewage, if that's helpful, which I need to remind myself before I answer any of those questions.
So operators of porta johnies would be a place where you might see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
If they're keeping it on site somewhere.
Yeah, again, to me, it seems like this would be something that the majority of the time would be covered by an ECA. those individuals that are emptying porta johns, septic companies. I would think that they should, but
Yep.
in this case, it's just the catch-all to cover anyone who doesn't. There have been, and I've been involved. It's not pretty, but there are some chemical cleanup situations that do use human waste as a way to clean up. Again,
Oh, interesting.
It's just the way the human waste eats up the enzymes and eats up the chemicals and changes it. This was a project I worked on when I was out west at a Dow plant. It's not nice to be around, but again, those are the kinds of things that those companies, and CH2M Hill out in Amherstburg, that cleanup company has done it. So there's different things where this would be kind of the safety net in case there aren't any ECAs in place.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Matthew.
Okay, great. Motion to approve the proposed new policy for hauled sewage to be submitted to MACP for early engagement. Ron and John, thank you. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Okay. So report 9 is about the land disposal of hazardous municipal and or petroleum refining waste, and also the storage of those things. So the first policy doesn't really change. There was no change to the director technical rules. What this committee decided back at when they developed these policies is to put land disposal of hazardous municipal and petroleum refining waste within one policy. So all I've done with this one is to bring it into the AODA compliance template. But then we did something similar with this policy that I proposed for a couple here, where we said we would allow for existing threats in Amherstburg IPZ1, and we would manage those and prohibit future. We know from the ministry's implementation that they have not identified any existing threats. So I'm just suggesting that we remove that clause and just go with prohibit existing and future in all 3 of the IPZ1s. One thing that I want to make note here that I think is a little bit unusual in this policy is that there's a statement in here indicating that Windsor and Amherstburg reflect the policies in their official plans, but this doesn't fall under the list of policies that you have to do that. So I'm going to follow up with you guys during consultation to sort of figure out if that's appropriate language. So there's no impact from this particular policy change. It's really just an editorial change. The storage of hazardous waste. This one definitely took a lot of thinking to sort of work my way through. They made a lot of changes to this in the director technical rules. It was previously waste disposal sites, and it had different names. And it was this PWQRSTU clause, which actually didn't apply to us, so we didn't have to worry about it. But now it's broken down into these 4 distinct types of storage of hazardous waste. So there's the transfer and processing sites approved to receive hazardous waste or liquid industrial waste, or sites that are specifically receiving only municipal waste. And then there's also these other 2 items down here, which we don't have to worry about because they don't score out for us to consider them a significant drinking water threat. So we don't have to address those 2. So for subthreat 1.10, the transfer processing sites approved to receive hazardous or liquid industrial waste. These sites are approved by the ministry. They require an environmental compliance approval. So again, this is a prescribed instrument policy. The difference between 2013 and 2021 is that it didn't include that statement there that said at an approved site. So this would have been hazardous waste basically stored anywhere for any reason. So it's clarifying it, and it's actually making it a little bit of an easier policy to implement for us because it becomes a prescribed instrument policy and we take away the risk management policy.
Okay.
However, excuse me, the vulnerable area to which the policy applies has changed. So previously, the storage of hazardous waste was not considered a significant drinking water threat in Windsor IPZ2, but it will be now. But again, this will be done through prescribed instrument. Anybody that has this should already have an environmental compliance approval in place. So their ECA would just reflect that it's also within a vulnerable area. The storage of municipal waste, again, is a regulated site that has an ECA associated with it. It's replacing a very complex, difficult to interpret set of circumstances, so it really clarifies it. This one for us is new because it previously was only a threat with vulnerable scores of 10, but now applies to vulnerability scores of 9. So this is a new threat for us in Windsor IPZ1, Lakeshore IPZ1, and Amherstburg IPZ1. But again, it would be using that prescribed instrument. So that's just giving you a look at, so every one of these reports has a table in it that has the previous circumstance, the current circumstance, and where it applies, so that you can see where those changes happened. Sorry, my pile of humans has just arrived home. I don't know if you can hear more extra sound in the background. So for this one, with the proposed policy approach, again, I'm proposing just a prescribed instrument policy. This is new for the storage of waste. I'm suggesting that we prohibit all existing and future in the IPZ1, so anything with score 9, and that we manage existing and future in Windsor IPZ2. And again, that's going to come out through implementation, whether that actually even exists in Windsor IPZ1. So the policy text there, you can see just is showing that, right, that we're prohibiting existing and future and allowing it in Windsor IPZ2. And Windsor IPZ2 is only the hazardous and liquid industrial waste, not municipal waste. Whew, that's a lot of stuff. Again, I expect that the impact of this will be minimal because of the areas that it applies to. We know there's no existing threats in the IPZ1s, and we're allowing for any existing or future threats in Windsor IPZ2 to be managed at this time. So one of the things that this committee can discuss is whether managing that threat is appropriate or whether you'd like to prohibit it. But normally we've opted to prohibit only when we know it does not exist.
Okay, committee, questions? Chris? Tim?
So Katie, at the point in time where you have enough information to know whether that threat exists in Windsor IPZ2, does that require a whole new policy or an amendment to the existing policy, or what would be the procedure, since they're all currently regulated by ECAs?
We wouldn't have to change it. So if this committee is comfortable with leaving it as managed through an ECA, then we leave it as managed. The only time that that the policy would need to be changed is if the committee decided they would rather it be prohibited.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anybody else? Seeing nobody else, there's a recommendation, same as the last one, I guess, that
Yep.
the SPC
Oops.
approved the proposed amended new policies.
Yep.
for
To be sent to
landfilling.
the ministry. Mhm.
Yeah. In various categories to be submitted to the MECP for early engagement. Motion, Jim,
So moved.
Chris. Jim and Chris, okay. All in favor? Carried.
Right. Okay, so report number 10 is about stormwater management. So this one has a lot. This table, I made a note for myself. What page is this table on? Because I know it's going to be small here. It's on page 25 of your agenda. So previously, stormwater management was just a single subthreat called stormwater management. And now it's been separated out into two subthreats called outfall of a stormwater management facility or stormwater drainage system and stormwater infiltration facility. So the new threat circumstances, when they determined what these would be, there were stakeholder engagement groups that happened at that time. People reviewed all of the potential language around the circumstances and gave feedback on that. One of the things that they had originally tried to do was pull greenhouses out and put them in with industrial land uses, but myself and others were, we can't call greenhouses anything other than agriculture, so they remain with agriculture, for better or for worse. It's just, it is what they are. So there's a lot of different categories here, and this committee doesn't necessarily need to get into the, who's going to have this or whatever. Again, it's something that needs an environmental compliance approval. The big change is that it's now requiring, when somebody puts an application in for a stormwater management system, they're going to have to provide the percent imperviousness of their property, of the area that the stormwater management pond is draining, which I think they already have to do. So I don't think it's extra burden. So then it's determined based on the imperviousness of the area draining into the stormwater pond, whether or not they need to have their ECA reflect this source protection policy. The thing that's highlighted there is that there is a change. So Windsor IPZ2 does have a policy now that it didn't have to have before, where the stormwater management facility is on commercial or industrial land uses with impervious area greater than 20% of the drainage, for the IPZ2 is greater than 50% of the drainage area being impervious. So again, that's going to fall to the actual proponent applying to create these stormwater management systems to provide that information for their environmental compliance approval. So again, the proposed policy approach is for prescribed instrument. And I'm proposing that we manage existing and future, which is the same direction that this committee took for stormwater management previously. So that means that it allows for that activity to carry on. It just means that their environmental compliance approval needs to reflect that, they know that stormwater pond is within a vulnerable area and that they're taking extra measures to make sure there's no impact on the environment. So the proposed policy text is there. That's just pretty much the same or similar language that was in the previous policy. So policy impact, don't know at this time because Windsor IPZ2 is a new area where the policy applies, but we have to do it because we need to bring our policies into alignment with the 2021 Director Technical Rules. We know that the ministry did not identify any existing threats previously, so the IPZ1s are probably fine. And as I said, it's dependent on the impervious area serving the stormwater management facility, not the percent impervious of the entire vulnerable area. So that's that one.
Okay. Questions of Katie?
Katie, just wanted to double check just with recent news and hearing Tim Burney speaking recently about the province's plans to fast track new housing. I believe it sounded like this type of activity wouldn't be impacted. It was some of the more ancillary items that IRCA handles. Is that the case? Is this still going to fall under, approvals will be required before new construction is approved? As far as you know.
So I can't speak to our the permitting and regulations side of what the Conservation Authority does in terms of source water protection. So there's staff at Conservation Ontario that are reviewing this piece of legislation very carefully to see, in each and every line of it to figure out what the actual impact is. The early assessment is that there shouldn't be any impact on the delivery and implementation of source water protection programs and policies. So not anticipating any change in terms of source water, and keeping in mind that the Clean Water Act is separate from the Conservation Authorities Act. so the policies that we write here are to be implemented by the implementing bodies identified within them, where our permitting and regulations is determined by the Conservation Authorities Act.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Ron?
Ron?
Yeah, just a question on when a stormwater pond is dredged out, which happens, I think, every 20 years or so, depending on its location, and especially in industrial parks, that when it's pumped out or dredged out, what is that material classified as?
Do you know the answer to that, Beth? I don't know the answer to that, Ron, but I'm sure there's we'll have to, Lisa, if you can, I'll make a note, and if you can make a note as well, and Beth, to look into that, because there's a piece of legislation that goes with like every kind of garbage that you want to throw out. So there's got to be something for that as well. So whether that becomes, depending on, you know, if it is from an industrial place, does that become hazardous waste at that point? I'm not positive, but good question.
I can speak to, we haven't had to dredge our pond. We have a very small pond here, but it would fall under our requirement that any material that is disturbed on our site, not only it has to be tested and would then become either hazardous or non-hazardous material based on the testing results. But then also and I can't put my finger on it either, but there has been some newer legislation that requires that material cannot stay on site. We can't just move it to another part of our site. It has to be removed from site and disposed of properly. But the short answer is it depends on what the test results say. We do have some areas of our property that when we remove it can be taken directly to normal landfill, just because the test results dictate that.
Thank you.
Excuse me for just 1 second. Well, I can't figure out how to do that.
Jim, do you have your hand up? Oh, no, that's my cursor turned into a hand because it landed on your picture. Sorry.
So the teenagers came home very excited about lots of things, so I had to just ask them to turn their volume down.
So we're good? We're good.
Okay,
So
awesome.
The recommendation is very similar, that this policy for stormwater management be submitted to MECP for early engagement. Moved by Matthew, supported by Chris. Next time, Cynthia.
We'll get you. Okay, our next report.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, we're not ready. Sorry.
All in favor? It's carried. Next.
I
Now-
got excited
okay.
about whatever it is we're talking about now. Oh no! Ooh, this was a good one. So this is the application and storage of pesticide. So previously in the 2013 Director Technical Rules, there was a prescribed list of pesticides that were considered a significant drinking water threat. And that has now been removed. So now the circumstance is just pesticide. So without identifying which pesticides they are. Also the storage specified that the pesticide was stored for retail sale, but that's now excluded. So it's just storage of pesticide for any reason. So one of the questions that Tom and I have too is the application of pesticide requires a pesticide permit, but the storage does not. So we're just sort of trying to figure out what that permit looks like. But for our policy purposes, we need to have both a prescribed instrument policy and a risk management plan policy. So when you look at that table that shows you what the previous significant drinking water threat circumstances were versus the current significant drinking water threats. This is where we can kind of get into it a little bit more. So within the IPZ1s, it's pesticide applied to land where the disposal area is greater than 1 hectare. And I know Tom had a question about what's the difference between disposal area and application area. So I don't know if that's, maybe Beth, if that's something you can take a look at. And I don't know the answer to that. I assume it's one and the same. So in the IPZ1s, the area is greater than 1 hectare for application of pesticide. Lakeshore and Amherstburg, that's very unlikely. In Windsor, there are some like parklands that are at least that size. So it would be a conversation with the city about the pesticides that are potentially used in those areas, if there are any. In Windsor IPZ2, it's application of pesticide on an area greater than 10 hectares. And one of the things that I did this fall was to actually look at the aerial photography in the Windsor IPZ2 and identify anything that looked like a park or grass space or anything like that, and use a GIS tool to measure them out to try to find how many properties there are that are even that size. And there's not that many. So the policy won't really apply to that many properties, and the likelihood of them actually applying pesticide on that large of a scale is probably minimal. And then we have the storage of pesticide in those IPZ1s identified as a significant drinking water threat. Again, that is very, very, very unlikely in those IPZ1s. And I would argue that I don't think it is happening in those IPZ1s. So I'm not too concerned about that. But what we've done is I stuck with the same approach that we took when there were specific pesticides named. So I didn't change the approach to any of this. So we still have our prescribed instrument policies. We still have our risk management policies. And I've stuck with the managing that threat. So we're not prohibiting it. We're allowing for it to be managed. So there's no prescribed instrument for storage. So we can only have the risk management plan for that. So that's the language that goes along with that. And then for application, we would have the prescribed instrument and the risk management plan to capture any of those instances when a prescribed instrument might not apply. Looking at the policy impact, not too sure, but we have to do it to be in alignment with the 2021 director technical rules. However, I'm suggesting that we manage the threat rather than prohibit it, so that creates fewer implementation challenges. Again, that storage is unlikely. The application could happen, but is not really likely. And there is a requirement for anybody utilizing any pesticides to either have a pesticide grower safety certificate if they are the farmer applying it on their land, which there are no agricultural lands in these areas, or you have to have a license that is provided to you by the Ministry of Environment if you're applying it on somebody else's behalf. So yeah, so those are the pesticide policies, is again just that approach to manage existing and future, but without a list of specific chemicals.
Questions? Nobody? Okay. Cynthia? Okay. Cynthia moves the recommendation that we approve the proposed amended policies for application storage of pesticide and submit it to MACP for further engagement. Seconder. Antoinetta. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Fabulous. Okay, we're nearly done. Oh, this one's easy. This one's super easy. So this one is just all the other
Katie?
policies that yeah.
Sorry.
Excuse me, I lost internet connection. Who seconded that motion?
Oh, Antonetta.
Antoinetta.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, so this last report, so as I said, I'm going through all of the policies. We have 50 policies in our source protection plan. They all have to be brought into compliance with AODA standards so that they meet accessibility standards. While I'm doing that, I'm also just kind of reading them, making sure that they still read right. If there's been any implementation challenges, just sort of trying to capture some of those and shift a bit of language if I need to there without changing the intent of any of these policies. So the policies that are within this report have no changes to the director technical rules. So there's not really any change happening there. They're just editorial. So that we have a policy for mine tailings and application of agricultural source material. There's no change at all to those two policies. They're just brought into AODA compliance. And then there's a set of policies that have minor edits. We had 2 general education and outreach policies that basically said the same thing, but kind of applied to different areas. So I've just put those into one policy that has IRCA as the implementing body, because that's something that we do anyway. And we just, we provide that content and that education and outreach regardless. So I just created that into one policy. We had the stewardship and initiative incentive policy. And we talked about this, I think, a little bit before with the fuel. So we had 2 stewardship and incentive policies. One was specific for fuel, and then the other one was for all other low and moderate threats. And the way the policies were written, it said that IRCA would apply for funding for those things. Well, there is no funding to apply for those things. So there was never really an opportunity to do so. So again, I've taken those 2 policies and created only one policy that basically reads that IRCA will apply for funding if it becomes available, so that we can help people to implement risk management measures. And just so that you know, we're always looking for those cost share sort of programs. We always offer agricultural BMP programs. So that's an ongoing thing we do anyway. The airplane de-icing policy has been a bit of a thorn in my side, because the way that it was written, it was like every year I had to write the airport authority and tell them they couldn't put an airport in the middle of Windsor. And so it was a really annoying policy, if I'm honest. So I made a change to that policy that just makes it read that we will inform them if they ever propose to put an airport there, that they have to consider the runoff of de-icing material in those places. So it's, again, just a little editorial shift that will make my life a bit easier. And then the livestock grazing is identified as a significant drinking water threat in those IPZ1s. We made that a land use planning policy for Windsor and Amherstburg previously. That basically that policy just reads that Windsor and Amherstburg can't change their current official plan to allow for livestock grazing in their IPZ1s, but the committee thought that was kind of pointless for Lakeshore IPZ1 because it's a marina. So instead, the policy was that every year I had to write Lakeshore a letter to tell them that they can't graze cows on the marina. So I changed that one too. I took that policy out and just am adding Lakeshore into the land use planning policy, because that's never going to be a permitted use there. So that's that shift there. Questions? Beth has her hand up.
Questions?
Thanks. I was just curious about the airport de-icing one, which I also think is a hilarious one. So specific. Just wondering, just because I'm not familiar with it, if you considered removing the policy, just because that flexibility was added to remove the policy, if there was rationale provided that like there's no way an airport would ever be built in those areas based on land uses.
Yeah, so that was we did discuss that. We discussed that for the hydrocarbon policies when that came up, and what the committee decided at that point, because you have to be pretty irrefutable that that'll never happen. So rather than having to go through that process of making an irrefutable case for, that could never happen, we decided to write the policies.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So that's the direction that the committee gave me previously. So I just rolled with that.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. I did appreciate that the the ministry allowed us to do that, but it came with a pretty big caveat, and it comes with risk then too, right? So on the off chance that happens, and this committee was like, that'll never happen. Any other questions about any of these?
Unless the only thing that might happen is some entrepreneur decides to land float planes at the dock in Bell River or something, you know?
Yeah.
Because
That's
a float plane would, I guess the lake would be a runway, wouldn't it?
Well, so the airplane de-icing, it specifically is about national airports, I think.
No, I'm sorry?
National airports, I think, is specified,
Oh, okay.
but doesn't matter. We're never going to have to worry about it, but we
Right.
wrote a policy.
Okay,
So
mark
Yeah.
my words, somebody's gonna come up with that idea.
probably.
We live in interesting
Now-
times, don't you know
Now
that?
that you said it,
Okay. So the recommendation is that the SPC approve the proposed amended policies in this report to be submitted to MECP for early engagement. Moved by Matthew, seconded by Jim Drummond. All in favor?
so
Carried. Thank you.
Chris is looking more and more like he's in a horror movie.
Who?
Chris Snip, because his background
Oh.
is getting darker and darker, and then he's just there you go.
Turn on delight. All right.
Awesome. So that's the
Okay.
end of the reports. I do
Is that
have
better?
Yeah. I'm less frightened.
Halloween's over, Chris. Okay, let's see where I'm at here.
So we have no
That's all
new
done.
business, but I do have got a little bit of other business.
Yeah, just give me a sec. That's the end of the reports.
That is the end of the reports. We made it.
New business, any new business? Nobody has any new business. Katie, other business.
Yeah, I have a little bit about it. I'm going to toot my own horn a little bit. So like I said, we've got 50 policies to right now. After this meeting, you guys, we have amended 37 of those policies, and we have written 5 new policies. So we have 13 existing policies left to review, and I have to write 1 new one for Dean Apples. The remaining threat categories that we have to look at are salt, snow, Dean Apple, transport pathways, and wastewater. Wastewater is 10 of those 13 existing policies that we have to review. 7 of them are specify actions for the city of Windsor. So Kevin, probably early next week, I'm going to send you and Tom a package of those 7 policies, and we're going to spend some time deciding whether or not Windsor still wants those specify action policies. Just a heads up. So
Thank you for the warning.
yeah, you got it. So coming.
Now he's going on vacation next week.
See ya. No, so when those policies were written, Stan Taylor wrote those policies in consultation with the city of Windsor. And if you read those specify action plans or policies, they were written to reflect work that the city was already planning on doing. So now when we do our annual reporting, the city has done those things. So now they're reporting back that these specified actions have been accomplished. So we can either at this point remove those policies from the plan, or we can, redo those policies so that they're more reflective of what the city has going forward. So these are for like CSOs and that kind of thing. So if the city already has a plan in place for monitoring CSOs, then that policy can be, reflective of what the city's plan already is. So like, good job, me. I did a lot of work, but and also for you guys for sitting and listening to all the policy talk. I do think we're ahead of a lot of the other source protection regions and areas. In terms of getting our way through the director technical rules. We have it a little bit easier because we just have the IPZs to deal with, and we don't have wellhead protection areas. So my goal is to have these remaining policies to you for our winter meeting, which will either be January or February. And then after that, I will make one big package of policies that can go to the ministry for review. So our tentative schedule for 2023 will meet up in January or February to go through those remaining policies and a little bit of additional technical work that'll go into our Section 36. And then we'll meet in March to go over annual reporting. And that is a meeting that we do. It's every year we get together in March. And Beth, normally what happens at that point is that's when our liaison officer tells us about the previous year's results. And then we take a look at what we've got. And then in May, we'll go through any of the remaining Section 36 updates. And in June, that'll be ready to go out for consultation. And then we'll meet together in the fall after consultation is done to go through the comments that we receive before we submit our final version to the ministry by the end of 2023. That's the
Okay.
plan. Yeah.
Sounds good. So.
John, I don't know if you're speaking to us or not, but you were muted. Good. Okay.
Is that it? That's it?
That's it.
Okay.
That's
The other
it.
one, we had was 4 or 4:30.
Yeah. What I'll do actually is I can send a little poll out, maybe would be easiest and get people to respond.
Okay. Is that good, Lisa? Yep.
I figured
Okay.
out how to put polls into emails recently, so.
Was it my imagination? I thought I saw Albert Dion on the screen
He did.
for a while.
Oh, did you see him pop? Oh, Aaron Korstein popped in for like a second and then he left again and I lost him.
Okay.
I didn't see Albert. Albert's actually on leave right now. So I was a little surprised that he had accepted it.
Okay. I'm just checking my.
And I don't know, I hope I didn't miss anybody else popping in or out because it's hard when I'm sharing my screen and.
Oh, that's
stuff.
good. Actually, Lisa's probably looking at that too. Yeah. All right.
Wait, I can stop sharing.
Nothing else? Nobody has anything else? Tim has come to attention.
I'd like to
He's
move-
ready.
Mr. Chairman, as one of the, also myself and John Barnett have also been here since the beginning of time, but
This is true.
they'll hold the lead in making the motions for adjournment. So I'll continue.
All right. Thank you, Tim. And John? Since you were mentioned, okay. Thank you. The meeting's adjourned.
Awesome. Thanks,
Night,
everybody.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a
Take
good night.
care. Thank you, you too.
Yeah, good night. Thanks, everyone.